I believe that a really good way to understand a culture is through its gardens. This is an extraordinary journey to visit 80 inspiring gardens from all over the world. Some are very well known, like the Taj Mahal or the Alhambra. And I'm also challenging my idea of what a garden actually is. So I'm visiting gardens that float on the Amazon, a strange fantasy in the jungle, as well as the private homes of great designers. And the desert flowering in a garden. And wherever I go, I shall be meeting people that share my own passion for gardens, and my epic quest to see the world through 80 of its most fascinating and beautiful gardens. My journey this week has brought me to a region of rich diversity, both botanical and cultural. It's a steamy tropical subcontinent with some of the fastest growing plants and cities in the world, Southeast Asia. This is Bangkok, the capital of Thailand and one of the noisiest, dirtiest, most polluted cities in the world. And it's the starting point for my journey to find the real exotic tropical garden. Now, we in the West have taken plants and the concept of the jungle garden and put it in our northern backyard. But here, where there are only two seasons, where it's either wet or it's dry, it's always hot and plants grow constantly, I want to see what the real tropical garden is like. This will take me on a trip right through the Southeast Asian region. I'll start in Thailand, in the garden of a Western silk merchant. I'll then head nearly 1,000 miles south to visit the self-proclaimed garden city-state of Singapore. Finally, I'll cross the Java Sea to experience a little of the deep spirituality and diverse cultural influences of the Indonesian island of Bali. Our fascination with lush tropical plants has been going on for at least 200 years, and it's growing. There are many urban gardens that are using that in their backyards, and a garden as well. We made a jungle garden. But it's in an idiom that actually was forced by a set of circumstances that were partly industrial and partly political, because the British Empire started to take over the Asian world and bring back plants as part of colonization. People made more and more money, bought large houses, and wanted trophy plants to show off, to show their status. And then the development of plate glass and cast iron and cheap fuel meant that vast glass houses, like the one at Kew, could be made so people could go in and immerse themselves in what they thought of as a jungle. Typically, these gardens were lush, green, and full of exotic varieties, usually much bigger and faster growing than anything that we could find at home. And these plants, although beautiful and exciting in their own right, also acted as indicators for all the richness of tropical life and suggested a freer, less inhibited world. It was from the first an intoxicating and intense association. My journey to discover the reality behind that potent image starts here. The consensus seems to be that if you want to visit gardens in Bangkok, the first place to go to is Jim Thompson's house. So that's where I'm starting. If you're in Bangkok, you've certainly got to take a tuk-tuk. But the one disadvantage is if you're taller than about 4'6", you can't see a thing. In 1946, Jim Thompson, an American entrepreneur and bon viveur, moved to Thailand and proceeded to revolutionize the Thai silk industry. His house, right in the center of Bangkok, sits surrounded by a densely planted tropical garden. Jim Thompson mysteriously disappeared in the Malaysian jungle in 1967, and no one did anything to the garden for 25 years, which, as jungles will, grew enormous and impenetrable. One of Jim's friends, the garden designer Bill Warren, was part of the team that took the garden back in hand
and he's here to show me round.
The house was really designed as a theater set and as a place to entertain. And Jim entertained here every night. It's not designed, let's say, for comfort, because this room is open. There are no screens. Jim wanted to look down on a jungle.
And the little houses in there were...
These little houses were the servants' quarters. There was the houseboy, the cook, and the gardener.
When did you first come here?
I came to visit in 1959.
Yeah.
And actually, I came to the housewarming.
Okay, let's go and have a look at the rest of the house. Where should we go next?
The garden weaves around and under the house, rising on various levels and screening out the city that is on 3 sides.
We're now underneath the main house, I guess.
Right.
One can't help but notice the way that the garden forms this green drop in the background without any sky. So you have garden but no sky, which of course is the jungle effect.
Jim had a plan of this house, and he marked this area jungle.
That effect doesn't take a lot to achieve, does it? I mean, there are certain key plants, certain ways of doing it, which is this layering of foliage.
Things like the fan palms and the gingers, they all create different textures and different colors, if you look at them carefully.
I love the little ponds in pots.
These were to catch the rainwater, but they have used lotuses for decoration in them. And you had those in the bathrooms when I first came to Thailand, and we bathed from one of these jars.
Really?
Jim Thompson finished the house in 1959 and just 8 years later disappeared after going for a walk in the jungle whilst on holiday in Malaya. After the garden lay untended for a quarter of a century, Bill was asked to help restore it as it was in Jim's day.
Standing here, you can only see foliage with just touches of that red of the ginger through there.
I cut down a lot of trees so that you could see the roof lines. You can go on cutting forever in a tropical garden. Probably it could use some cutting back now.
It's hard for people used to Western gardens to appreciate just how fast this sort of garden will grow if left untended.
Oh, yes. These are heliconias.
It's almost sculptural and sort of unbelievable as a flower, isn't it?
Yes.
It's so physically solid.
If you made it in plastic, you wouldn't know the difference. This is the spirit house. Every Thai residential or business compound has a spirit that's supposed to watch over the fortunes of the people who live in it. Every day they make offerings of burning incense, flowers, to keep the spirit happy.
I think here, like any garden, you've got to know something of the context. Jim Thompson placed his garden here, absolutely knowing that he was looking out over his village of Muslim silk weavers. Really rather like a sort of mill owner in Victorian Britain looked out over his workers. They could see him and he could see them. And the whole place is to do with performance and command and display. I like Jim Thompson's garden. And clearly a lot of people do. 175,000 visitors a year don't lie. But it wasn't a Thai garden, and I think, to be fair to Jim Thompson, he would never have pretended it was. It was an approximation of what he thought a jungle might be. And the really telling thing was that after his disappearance, they had to clear the growth back to make it look like a jungle garden. And we could do that at home. It's not the real thing. It's not got me any closer to Thai indigenous gardens or gardening or culture even, I don't know.
But I've read that the fastest way to get an insight into Thai culture is to be out in a public park at precisely 6 p.m. Guidebooks will tell you that everybody stops for the national anthem, but actually seeing it happen is an extraordinary thing. The image of the king is everywhere, and any kind of disrespect towards it is regarded as sacrilege and a very serious criminal offence. The royal palaces, then, are places of huge significance to Thai people. And it seemed to me that I should visit one or two of them to see the gardens on the basis that they must surely be a profound influence. The best-known royal palace is the Grand Palace, which is a major tourist attraction. Religion, in this case Buddhism, the state, buildings and plants, all merged together. It seems to me to be a surprising and eclectic mix, with tightly clipped cloud topiary, strongly influenced by Chinese gardens, Thai temples and shrines and massive buildings. It's all fascinating, but very strange. Now, the Grand Palace definitely tells me something about Thailand, but not a lot about any kind of gardening style. And to try and get closer to that, I'm leaving the centre of Bangkok to visit the King's horticultural project, situated in the grounds of his official residence, the Chitlada Palace.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon. Rosalind Smita-Bindu has been guiding dignitaries around the palace and grounds for more than 30 years.
Ah, so here you go, cattle. Hello, my dear. They look very well.
Clearly, these are not your ordinary palace gardens. Since 1961, the king has been using his grounds to try out sustainable methods of food production that his subjects can then apply in their own gardens.
How many people work in this project?
About 700.
700?
Yes.
Now, what are you growing on these plots?
This is rice field. But during this time, we grow mung bean, soya bean, and peanuts. That's for rotation crops.
And then when do the rice go back in?
In August.
And this is to keep the birds off, is it?
Yes. We have lots of birds here because not far from here, this is our demonstration forest.
There's a lot going on here, isn't there?
Yes, this is from 1961.
So for the last 45 years,
Yes.
His Royal Highness has been building up this demonstration for the Thai people or
Yes,
for himself?
yes, for the Thai people because he learning by doing here and he also have it educating people. So why we have lots of visitors come here to see the projects.
I came expecting to see something that fulfilled my preconceptions of a palace garden. But Rosalind has more horticultural research projects and labs to show me. This one aims to protect the disappearing biodiversity of Thailand's indigenous species.
It's getting dark now. So during this time you can hear the voice of many birds.
We visited the patch of demonstration forest that was in the centre of the park. And as the light fell, the insects came out.
I'm going to just put some of that on.
The park is remorselessly practical. and felt a little bit more like a corporate research station than a garden. But inside this jungly bit, despite the paved walkways, you do get a hint of what almost all of Thailand must have been like until relatively recently. The jungle was not something that you would try and cultivate. In fact, it was kept firmly at bay. The king's projects at the Chitlada Palace are designed to be an example for his subjects to follow, and as such they do work. Today, Thai rice growing has apparently been transformed by the work done here.
I can't help feeling that there's one element glaringly absent, and that's any sense of aesthetic. I mean, it just wasn't very beautiful.
Bangkok, for all its pollution and veniality, is a beautiful and entrancing place. So I'm finding it hard to reconcile that stark functionality that I saw at the Chitlada Palace with the fascinating tangle of Bangkok street life. There seems to be a dissonance there, something I'm missing, as I try and discover the archetypal tropical garden.
Well, I've had a night's sleep, a chance to think about it. And I think the best way to understand this problem is to go from the very top of Thai society in the Royal Palace down to a more ordinary level and have a look around and see what people are growing at home.
To help me explore the private gardens of Bangkok, Patravadi Mututhong, a well-known Thai actress, has offered to take me off the beaten track. Well, off the track altogether, actually, because we're off to explore the klongs. A klong is the name given to any of the waterways that still vein through Bangkok, despite the relentless development of the city. And the name is a good start. Who couldn't love anything called a klong? They used to be the main way to get around, although nowadays the klongs are packed with tourists. But you can see the gardens all the way along them, from the poorest shack to the grooviest apartment.
Do people not mind the noise?
We do mind, but nobody does anything about it.
But lots of plants. I mean, every balcony.
Yeah. It's every Thai heart, there's always some softness.
But are they particular plants?
The plants you see, they're very common plants that grow very easy. You don't have to water it all the time. Like this one, this pink flower, it grows by itself, really.
The bougainvillea.
Easy to look after.
So people don't really want to garden. No. They want the plants, but they don't want to look after them.
Right, it's hot. It's hot.
So too hot to work outside?
Yeah, in your country, it's cool and you need the sunshine. We hide from the sunshine. We don't like sunshine.
Okay.
It's too hot.
What about in the rainy season?
Oh, then it's too wet.
Okay. That is fabulous. I'm going to take a picture of this because I like that.
Beauty have to be useful.
Beauty has to be useful.
Yeah.
To see how beauty and usefulness coexist in a Thai garden, Patravadi suggested that we stop at one of the houses and ask to have a look around.
สวัสดีค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ ค่ะ เดี๋ยวเข้าไปดูสวนหน่อยได้ไหมคะ นี่ อันนี้บ้านอีกบ้านหนึ่งอ๋อ นี่บ้านหนึ่งอ๋อ this is his father's house.
Okay, that's his father's
And that's his house.
Okay, so...
In Thailand, we like to live together.
Okay.
Next to each other. It's handy.
It certainly is handy. Oh, look, plants everywhere. And beautiful pots there. Great, big, lovely pots.
Now, this is his home.
Here we go.
Some people worship King Rama V. It is very popular among Thai people.
Yeah. And these whiskies, all these whiskies.
เก็บไปดูเล่น เป็นการดูเล่นสวย
I just like the boxes. They look good.
He's right.
Yeah.
And then this beautiful garden.
Yeah.
So all these plants. And what is this plant here?
This is a tree. When you eat the fruit, you can eat lemon, and it's sweet.
Interesting. So, does he enjoy growing these plants?
คุณลุงสนุกไหมในการที่จะทำสวนเนี่ย
ก็คือเราก็ทำแบบเวลาว่างมีเวลาว่างแล้วก็ทำทานได้เลย
He said it's for relaxation, a little exercise. The fruits, the vegetable he can eat, and they are how to say chemical free.
And we have here what looks sort of like an apple or a...
It's the same family
Yeah,
as the apple.
this here.
We call it putsa.
Putsa.
It's delicious.
Is it?
Yeah, it's delicious.
You like your food, don't you? Very good, I like that.
Thai people like to eat. We eat all the time.
Well, you eat very, very nice food. So, we'll let this boat go by.
For the houses on the river, it's just like displaying, you know, flowers in front of the house and screening the pollution from his home.
I mean, I don't know this flower here. What is this one here?
อันนี้ย่าหนุนแมวครับ
Cat.
Cat's whiskers. So, I mean, does he find it easy to grow these plants in pots here on the river?
เราลาดน้ำไปไม้มันก็จะผุหรืออะไรนี่แล้วก็กลัวจะ
He has to be careful because when you water the plant, the wood gets heavier.
Yes.
So the balcony can go into the river.
Something I hadn't thought of. It's a very, very beautiful house and garden. Tell him that from me.
บอกว่าเป็นบ้านที่สวยแล้วก็สวนที่สวยมาก
ขอบคุณครับ
The beauty of Mr. Leck's garden was real and gave me great pleasure, but it was entirely based upon utilitarianism. It was not created as anything like our idea of an exotic tropical garden.
If you go looking for the exotic, the last place you're going to find it is where it grows. Because the exotic is always what we can't have, what we can't grow. The exotic is a state of mind. It actually doesn't really exist at all. It's time to leave Bangkok and move on. And I haven't really perceived an indigenous Thai gardening culture here. I don't think it exists. But Bangkok's a modern city and it's changing fast, and you can make a garden here in a matter of weeks because of the extraordinary climate. So it's possible to develop a style for gardens as opposed just for plants very, very quickly. And it could happen.
The next stage of my journey takes me south from Thailand, the 900 miles to the city-state of Singapore. I'm making the journey by train, racing through the Malaysian jungles and palm oil plantations and enjoying the most civilized way that there is to travel.
Coming from Bangkok, which is so rich in images and human life, and yet rather elusive when it comes to gardens, the next stop will be very, very different.
For the last 40 years, the government in Singapore has been pursuing a program of self-consciously greening the 270 square miles of this densely populated island nation. Today, it promotes itself as a city in a garden.
Thank you.
I'm staying at the Shangri-La Hotel because it was built in 1971 right at the vanguard of the corporate drive to make Singapore a green city. The centerpiece is the lush, very green tropical garden right at the heart of the hotel, with soaring planting down in the well of a balconied courtyard.
Well, there are strange things going on here, but it's a tale of two halves. And one half is really interesting, and the other is disturbing and shocking. Up above, with all this greenery and this, I think, rather beautiful architecture, it's a really good indication of what the hotel was setting out to do to embody the greening of Singapore. And succeeding. I think it's really beautiful. Down below, you have this weirdly horrible phony wood balustrading and steps, which looks like a bad theme park and could easily put you off. But this is not a garden. This is really to get at the concept that is the greening of Singapore. And for that, it's really good. Before I came to Singapore, I was sent this book called The Tale of the Magical Seeds, which is all about the wonderful greening of Singapore, issued by the National Parks people. And I'll just read you a little bit of it. There was once a beautiful tropical island in a clear blue sea. Are you sitting comfortably, by the way? Birds sang from trees and butterflies danced among flowers. Friendly animals played in the forest. You get the drift. Anyway, people came along and liked it and decided to make it their home. But in the process, and it's significant, the order of the words, that the people worked hard. Trees were cut, land was cleared, and many fine buildings and factories were built. The harbour filled with ships, and the city grew rich. And it says, the birds and butterflies went away. The friendly animals hid. The children became sick, and everyone was sad. Not good. So they turned to this master gardener who has magical seeds which he sows, and in due course they grow. Everything is rosy again, and the island becomes a garden. And the last page is, the island became a tropical paradise where happy people and their children lived in a garden and cared for nature.
That the government describes the greening of Singapore as a fairy tale is interesting, and there's no doubt that it is of huge symbolic importance to them. To find out exactly where the idea came from, we've been granted the rare privilege of an audience with the model for the mythical master gardener, former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew.
I saw Hong Kong. I saw Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok. And they were dreadful. I can't say that in public, but you know, they were concrete jungles, some tarmac and concrete. So I decided that we have to be different. When we started, it was just to combat the grayness and the drabness of a city which has no greenery.
Since the government of Singapore embarked on the greening project 40 years ago, skyscrapers and underpasses have been covered with plants, and more than 4,300 acres of parkland have been landscaped.
It's transformed what could have been a very drab, grey place into a clean, green and exciting place.
Well, it is famously clean, and I'm keen to have a look at its greenness for myself. There's no doubt, this is very different to Bangkok. In this city devoted to frenetic consumerism, the roads are lined with fabulous mahogany and rain trees, both smothered in epiphytes, and they are lush, green and extremely beautiful. As part of Lee Kuan Yew's green fairy tale vision, parks were laid out to give Singapore's densely packed population places to relax in, to take exercise and be stimulated. Bishan Park is held up as a fine example of Singapore's creation of these green spaces. I'm told that it's packed at weekends, but during office hours, it's all but empty.
This is a very disturbing place. It's got all the ingredients, and clearly there was a corporate plan to make it beautiful, get a designer in, clad the place in all the recognised elements of an enjoyable and pleasant garden, and it sort of has, but a garden must have humanity, and the more quirky and the more individual that humanity is, the better the garden will always be.
The truth is that it's easier for a garden to pass through the eye of a needle and be good and corporate. Singapore proclaims itself the city in a garden, but I don't think I've yet found that garden. Dr. Lawrence Leong Chi Chu is from NParks, the government department in charge of the greening process. Maybe he can help me solve this conundrum.
If we indeed want to be a city in a garden, so that the city actually rises from a garden ambience, then we need the presence of the garden everywhere you go.
How would you define a garden as opposed to a park?
A park must have space for informal recreational activities, but a garden is what you have here in this spa area, where particular attention is paid to how the plants are displayed. And if you extend this to the whole of Singapore, and you consider Singapore as a garden, then you have to see our roadsides, plants on our buildings, gardens along our canals. And now we are getting the people in the local communities to take up gardening as a hobby as well.
Can a garden be the entire city in all its component parts? Can it be dictated and laid out by governmental and corporate decree? Can it be enough that it's clean and useful and pleasant? Lots of questions. And although I know where my own instincts lie, I want to know more about Singapore's gardens, not my own attitudes. The truth is that as most people in Singapore live in high-rise flats, not many people have the chance to garden. But I've met up with Wilson Wong, who has harnessed the enthusiasm of users of his internet message board to create a communal garden.
Wilson, tell me the story of this garden. When did it start?
This garden was started about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
It was an initiative started by me to actually bring gardening to the residents who live in this estate.
And who designed it?
I was the one who designed it.
So you conceived it, you got the money raised, you persuaded people to do it, you've designed it. It's pretty much your baby.
Yeah, you can say that.
And what have you got at this end?
Okay, in the front part of this garden,
Yes.
we actually designed it in a medicinal garden in a
Yes.
European garden style.
So it's a herb garden based on a sort of European Renaissance model, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
We bring it to Southeast Asia.
Okay. I mean, this here, these cat's whiskers.
Yes, correct.
I last saw these in the backwaters of Bangkok. I never thought I would say that, but there we are.
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah. I have learned to appreciate the constant climate, all year round summer. We do not need to actually observe the seasons. Over here, you can just plant or plonk in whatever you want as and when you want it. And this is actually, locally we call it laksa leaf. It's actually a plant that it can actually be used in one of our local dishes. You can smell it. It actually has a very fragrant, nice aroma.
Oh, it does smell wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, these are your vegetable beds. What's your soil like?
Oh, over here the soil is very clayey, as you
Yes.
can see. So we actually have a very hard time trying to actually improve the soil texture.
Yeah.
When you talk about soil, topsoil, you get this kind of soil.
So will you be making your own compost?
Actually we are going to make a little compost heap here to actually compost them, returning
That's-
everything back into the ground.
This is exactly what I like to hear. It's
Yeah.
perfect. So tell me what you're growing there.
This is actually water spinach.
These are your first crops?
No.
But it's only been going for a couple of months. So you've already had one harvest?
Yes.
We nurture plants and we cosset them and we take them through their life journey, which, for cabbages or purple sprouting broccoli or something, we can sow the seed in April and harvest the following March or April.
Yeah. But over here, all it takes is just less than a month. I feel so attached to this garden. Can you imagine that in the middle of the night, I can bring my dog through this garden a couple of times. The residents here can actually be the witnesses. They said, who is this crazy guy that come down in the wee hours of the morning to look at his plants?
You're not alone, I assure you. You're not alone.
So that's how attached I am to this garden.
Wilson Wong's community garden is in itself wholly unremarkable, but it's undoubtedly the best thing that I saw in Singapore. Although it might seem ordinary, it's filled with the passion and enthusiasm of one individual bucking the corporate blandness that threatens to smother the rest of the garden city.
OK, to the airport, please.
Okay, sir.
There's no doubt that Singapore is really eager, desperately even, to present itself as a garden city. And I think it's completely genuine in that, to create what they call the city in a garden.
But that can only come alive if it's driven not by the state, but by the contrariness of individuals like Wilson. Predictably, at the airport, there's a display of orchids under the harsh terminal lights. Lush, exotic, beautiful, but completely artificial and rather depressing. And I feel further away from my idea of a tropical paradise than ever. But things are looking up, because my next stop is Bali. And on top of its obvious attractions, I know that gardens are completely central to the local culture. Bali is an Indonesian island just off the east coast of Java, and it's probably many people's idea of a perfect tropical paradise.
Wow. How about that for a view? That is magnificent.
The contrast with Singapore is dramatic and exciting. It feels as if the hunt for the ideal tropical garden is back on. And I celebrate by buying myself a snazzy piece of local headwear.
Bali has a combination of three things that make one think they may well be gardeners. For a start, it's volcanic soil, intensely fertile. Secondly, a long tradition of cultivation, very sophisticated use of the land, so that they're growing things all the time. And thirdly, this climate, which is common to the region, where everything grows tremendously fast. Put it all together, and it's perfect for making gardens.
To really understand that Balinese gardening tradition, you have to know a little about the predominant religion. Unlike the rest of Indonesia, where the majority are Muslim, more than 90% of Balinese practice their own version of Hinduism, which gives them a deep and ingrained respect for the natural world. And if I really wanted to get under the skin of the modern domestic Balinese garden, I was told that I should first go to a temple garden. And the best known of these is Pura Taman Ayun. It was built in 1634 as part of the capital of the ancient kingdom of Mengwi. A member of the local ruling family, Agong Prana, gave me the guided tour.
This is the central court where people usually prepare the offerings and perform the ritual dances.
And what's the significance of the trees you have here?
Those trees are special frangipani that we use very much as the main part of the offerings.
And what's that tree there with the
one with
scarf
the black and
around?
white
Yes.
skirts is called ancak. It's also a holy tree that we use as part of the offerings.
Right.
Because in the offering, the main part of the offering is flowers.
The flowers are practical.
Yeah.
They have significance. They're symbolic significance.
Yeah.
What about the trees themselves? Are they included in the sensation of reverence?
Yes, it is. We have the philosophy of life in Bali. We have what we call Tri Itakrana. We have to be friendly and in harmony with our God. We have to be friendly and harmony with our environments, and also socially with the human to human. So that's the balance of three. Yeah.
Now this is the entrance to the next court, is it?
Yeah. This is the main entrance to the main part of the temple, which is the inner court, which is called holy part of the temple, where prayer will be conducted.
So can we go through?
No, unfortunately, people who are not praying can only sit from the other side of the temple.
Oh. My word. So this, I hadn't expected to see this.
Yeah, this is the inner court of the temple.
Yes.
The holy part. And this part is surrounded by the water. Lotus and water lily is very much used in the offering. Beautiful looking, but also it is the symbol of seat of our deities and gods.
Right.
We try to keep it in serenity.
So serenity, it has a religious function. I mean, it's to do with the gods.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
That's all together. Now, explain to me the different functions of these buildings.
Those with the black roof, they are the shrines.
Yes.
And those buildings with the grass roof, they are the place of the offering, place for the ritual singers, and then also the place for the priests to conduct the ceremony.
Take my hat off, although I accept it's not the most flattering thing, but very good at keeping the sun out. I'm overwhelmed by this place. My reaction on coming here was fundamentally delight. And above all, this sense of balance and harmony that integrates every aspect of life, whether it be plant, human, spiritual, as one completely interwoven tapestry that you can't possibly unravel. And I think very beautiful. Now, it is important to square both sides of the equation of the spiritual and the normal human life. And to get the humanity side of things, whoops. Hello. I'm busy in a minute, okay? I've taken myself to the Kumbasari, which is the night market in Denpasar, which is about the busiest place I've ever been to in my life. However, even in here, the spiritual is to be found. All over the market, I found flowers and their petals for sale. These aren't for decoration, but, just as in the temple, they are the ingredients for making offerings to the gods. The completed offerings, intricate baskets that are said to represent the universe, are also made and sold here. Now, traditionally, these would have been made from flowers from people's own gardens, and I think a domestic home and garden is where I should go next. But before that, I need to sleep.
It's another absolute scorcher today, and I'm feeling a bit fragile because I spent the night without a wink of sleep, afflicted by, let's call it Bali belly. But there's still lots to see. And having seen the way that temples were laid out and all the ritual and significance that's tied into plants and how people use them, now I'm going to visit a private house which is in a compound, and an awful lot of Balinese people live in these compounds which are laid out in many of the same ways as a temple.
The temple gardens were clearly defined spaces, yet their role, and the role of the gardens and shrines in general, seems fused together. A local resident, Braggies Warrell, has offered to show me round this compound, which is one of many in the village, each home to an extended family and laid out in the same way, with individual buildings arranged within a large enclosed courtyard.
This is a house for living. This is for the old man because they open Bali.
Bali means house.
Yeah, Bali means house in Balinese.
Right. And this building here?
This is we call paon in Balinese language. We call kitchen.
So there's a kitchen there, and in the middle there's this area.
This is we call Bali delon. They use for all kind of ceremony, preparing the offering or cremation ceremony, wedding, whatever.
And what are they making there?
They prepare for the offering.
For offering for what?
The offering is symbolized to give something into the God.
Now what we have here looks to me like a little temple or a shrine.
Everyone, even in modern life, they have a small temple in the house.
Can we go through?
Yes.
So you have plants inside?
Yeah, this is hibiscus, I think. That's why we need the flower.
You need the flowers?
Yeah.
And
This pinka, we call.
pinka.
This used for the high paper.
Do you have a plant for a bad tummy?
For the somebody have what you call that when they're pregnant, they have.
No, I'm not pregnant.
That's what the one they have here.
Okay.
This called Bali Daja. People just get married. They must be stay a bit privacy. Yeah?
So they have privacy and pregnancy
Yeah,
plants
absolutely.
outside.
All together.
Very useful.
Yeah, very useful.
useful.
And also this plant, we call lily gondi.
And does it have a use?
Oh yeah, they use for the anti-mosquito actually.
And what's over there with those huge coconut trees?
Oh, this we call taba.
Taba.
Taba main garden, yeah, the back garden.
It's cooler here, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's quite cool for us.
Well, quite cool. It's actually just roasting hot. as hot as anything, but slightly less hot than outside. Would people treat this like a place to come and relax in, or is
Oh
it
yes,
just for work?
also. When they in the hot day like this time, after they have lunch, they have meal, the children and the mommy and everyone go to the backyard to playing around.
Are people making modern gardens in the spirit of this garden?
All this garden is completely like here, wild. They grow wild, but useful. Yeah, but modern plant is different than the concept of Balinese, original Balinese garden. Very different.
There is one big question that has to be addressed, and that is this a garden? Well, clearly it's fascinating and it's instructive and it's stimulating, but I think the garden side of it was summed up for me by watching the women sitting where I am now, making up the offerings from flowers they've grown, little baskets from the coconut leaves, and then going out and placing them with the relevant ritual. And that whole process, using plants, sitting in the center of the household, relating to their gods and balancing everything, balancing their entire world through these plants, seemed to me the essence of what is happening here. And it's not something I've ever found in this way anywhere else in the world.
The intimacy of the people and their plants, and the daily rituals of gathering the leaves and flowers for the offerings, and carefully making them into the beautiful little posies, seems to me to be as much gardening as any of our own more familiar horticultural primping and pruning. But even in Bali, there is a distinct element of this belonging to the past. And I'm curious to know how these complex and subtle traditions could be applied to a modern garden. So with that in mind, I go off to the Bati Jimbar estate. As Bali was opened up for tourism, first in the 30s and then more fully in the 70s, wealthy holidaymakers wanted their conveniently westernized luxury holiday homes to be adorned with gardens with a Balinese feel. Guests on this estate have included Mick Jagger and Jerry Hall, and it's rumoured Princess Diana. Already it's clear that there are elements of the compound here.
But as you walk in, there is a distinct aura. Money.
In contrast to what I've seen elsewhere in Bali, the house is distinctly luxurious, and the gardens are landscaped and grand.
But the real attraction, and actually something we haven't seen at all yet, looking for this paradise, is this. It's right slap on the sea. The warm tropical sea lapping just a few feet away from the edge of the garden. Now, as a gardener, it's astonishing that you can have a garden like this so close to the sea. So that's unusual. But I think the key here is fulfilling all the fantasies of what we Westerners, we tourists, want when we go on holiday.
The ceremonial house is handsome, and the banyan tree is by far the most striking example I've seen on the whole of this trip.
And the shrines are genuine. They're in the northeast corner, the boundaries of the garden, but there's none of the mess. There are no chickens walking around in it. It's very sanitized. This is a wonderful tropical holiday retreat. But I don't need a holiday. I'm in pursuit of the authentic tropical garden, and this is not it. Okay.
The Batajimba Gardens represent the beginning of a modern Balinese gardening style, but they were laid out over 30 years ago, and so now I want to see how modern Balinese design has evolved.
My last visit in Bali is to a man called Madi Wijaya. In fact, he was born an Australian called Michael White, but he came to the country over 30 years ago, fell in love with it, stayed here, and made a beautiful garden. Others admired it so much that he made gardens for them and quickly became established as an internationally renowned garden designer, specializing in tropical gardens. So what I want to know from him is how he's taken all the culture and ritual and spirit of the ancient Balinese style of garden and turned it into a thriving garden design business. It must be you. Hello. How are you?
Made arrived in Bali in 1973 by, at least according to his version, swimming ashore after first jumping ship during a violent storm. And whilst perhaps this is not the whole truth, the story seems to fit his larger-than-life persona. Somehow it's not surprising that this garden started off as a commission for someone else until he realised he liked it so much he had to keep it.
When you began to create gardens using Balinese courtyards and traditions, did you have to jettison any of the Balinese cultural history, if you like? And how much did you have to bring in to put on top of it?
Having grown up in Sydney, which was a subtropical paradise with artful, natural English design trends, it was easy for me in my work to introduce a more natural look, and it became known as the Bali style. But at the same time, I was very influenced working with the Balinese gardeners and living in a Balinese society by the fecundity, the wild colours, the incredible statuary, the peopling of the gardens with all of these shrines and things. So, in one way, I've been trying to keep the shrines and the idea of a spiritual garden, I guess, without it becoming too kitschy or cheesy or Disneyland.
I'd like you to talk me through your garden here, because clearly it's based on a compound. But the compounds that I've seen have had almost no aesthetic consideration at all. That seems to be incidental to the practical uses. Yet clearly here, this is primarily aesthetic.
I wanted it to be first and foremost a little mini history of all the different Balinese landscape trends. So I chose red brick shrines, and then I had water features that I'd seen in the palaces at East Bali. I've tried to collect ornamental courtyard trees and shrubs that you find in Balinese temples and palaces. The last one is a sand garden, which is a homage to the old sand gardens of the temples of Sano, or the coastal gardens, the gardens of the littoral.
Made's garden is a complex series of interconnected courtyards, which at once feels authentically Balinese and yet also thoroughly modern.
How do you feel about Westerners coming to Bali, seeing the light and the lushness and the fecundity, and then trying to recreate it back at home in grey London or Paris or New York? I mean, do you think that can work?
It really doesn't work. I'm forever being led into houses all over the tropical world. No, you must see our Balinese garden, and it's like the Antichrist. You know, it's this horrible cultural prostitution almost, but it's also very bitty and nasty. I think you always need to have cultural and geographical reference in a garden. It's better.
How much of that do you think is going to be lost as the culture changes, as inevitably it's going to?
Bali has a way of surviving. It survived Islamification, it survived colonization, it's pretty much survived mass tourism. Will it survive the real estate boom, which is putting the garden down? Let's see.
Made's garden was not what I'd imagined would be the goal of my journey, but I loved it. I'd found a truly creative garden, using local and to me very exotic planting, as well as being deeply entrenched in a local idiom, but making something new from it.
I set out on this trip to find the perfect tropical paradise, the garden that was the prototype for all those tens of thousands of jungle gardens that are made at home. But I've come to the conclusion that it's a fantasy. It's a figment of our holiday imagination, and what we're trying to do is store that experience so that we can feed off it like a battery.
Nevertheless, over the 2,000 miles I've travelled throughout Southeast Asia, I have seen fascinating things along the way, all suggesting some kind of tropical ideal. There were the practical, busy gardens of the Klongs in Bangkok, and the wonderful compounds in Bali. That overwhelming lushness and fecundity right across the region. And the modest but intense passion of the new gardeners in Singapore. All these had elements of the idealized exotic garden. But as for that real tropical paradise,
mankind will always be looking for that Shangri-La, that wonderful place. And actually, it exists within you.